welcome to the Athletic NBA Daily. I'm Zena Keita, continuing the season previews, and today we're talking all about the Sacramento Kings. We've got Morgan Ragan, Deuce Mason of NBC Sports California, covering the Kings up in Northern California. And guys, I want to know. I know it's quite a start, right?
Here we go. We gotta talk Sacramento today.
We gotta talk about Sacramento real quick, and let's talk about some of the things that happened over the course of the offseason. Of course, you officially have. This was not offseason, but this was in last spring. You officially have Doug Christie as your head coach. You saw some of the moves and the growth that happened under his helm. Just great defense. I think there was a little bit more organization out on the floor, and they felt like they were really bought in. And then this offseason, you made some swaps in the center position. Jonas Valanciunas gets swapped out for Dario Saric. I can keep going in terms of some of the moves that you made, but I don't think that anything was really game-changing for the Sacramento Kings. So I want to ask you guys, of the things that happened in this marquee offseason for the Kings, what would you say was the biggest change?
I mean, I think it's got to be with the new GM, Scott Perry. I mean, anytime you change the guy who's leading your front office, it's going to bring up some questions because, you know, Scott has a different outlook than the previous regime. And now it's going to be up to him. How does he tinker with this? You know, they had Dennis Schroeder. They need a point guard. I like Dennis. I think he's going to help them in some ways. And last year, after they traded De'Aaron Fox, they had no point guards. And then Malik Monk got hurt, and then he really had nobody to run the show at point guard. So I think Dennis was probably like the biggest move they made. Now, on the surface, that's like, really, that's the biggest move you made. I think it's going to help them. But I think for Scott, he's going to have to be patient here. You're saddled with some tough contracts, a team that is not technically your team that's constructed. And it's tough to say, but there has to be some patience, I guess, in Kings Nation for a group of fans that have been beyond patient, have seen a lot of tough basketball.
And that's a good one. That's a good one. But I also have to go with the draft pick. You got to go with Nick Clifford. I know it's like it's a rookie, and it's not like you can just sit here and say he's going to be the game changer of everything next year on the floor. I don't even know where the minutes are going to be, honestly. And you just never know what a rookie is going to look like necessarily in their first year, even when you see them in summer league and everything. But what I will say, that would be my positive game changer of just excited to see what he can do with the future. And that has to do a little bit with Scott Perry, obviously going for Nick Clifford in the draft.
It's as if I set you guys up for that, as if you knew I was setting you guys up for that, because I think personally, those two are really big and they're also connected. Of course, Scott Perry is the mastermind behind being able to trade up into the first round to get someone like a Nick Clifford. It also gets Maxime Renaud, who is a great Bay Area standout as center, going to be a great backup option as well. We know the Kings are going to necessarily need that, but I want to talk a little bit about also the players that are here. You mentioned Dennis Schroeder being able to come into this team, and that's going to be huge. He's been great pretty much all of his stops outside of the Warriors, and particularly in that defensive aspect. That perimeter defense is going to struggle a little bit, of course, with DeRozan out in the mix, Monk coming back off of his injury, and then Sabonis as your back line. You need that. You need a little bit of defense out there, and that's where Nick Clifford gets really excited as well, because he showed that he's kind of like a Swiss Army knife in those regards. Now, thinking from the perspective of adding Dennis Schroeder, you've got Nick Clifford, Malik Monk is back in the mix. Who are the players that are going to have to take a big step forward for the Kings in order for them to be in that conversation, especially in the Western Conference?
Zena, we've been talking about this all offseason because I'm just looking at how this team's been constructed, and we're still hearing noise, right? Like, oh, could the Kings have interest in Russell Westbrook? And you're like, okay, you got Westbrook, you got Schroeder, but you can't lose sight of the fact that one of the names you just mentioned, right? Nick Clifford, you want to find time to get this player opportunity. He may be a rookie, but he's an older rookie who should be able to play now. You also have Keon Ellis, who is a really talented player, 3-and-D, one of the best 3-and-D guys in the league, and he's going into a contract year. How are you getting him minutes? And someone that I think needs to take a step this year offensively is Keegan Murray. I think he's got all the tools, and we saw it defensively last year. He could defend. One night he's trying to check Steph Curry. The next night he's taking Kevin Durant. He's got the versatility you need in this league. But I think people expect more from him offensively. The question that we've been talking about is like, how do you achieve those things? Because you're starting
Schroeder, tell her.
Zach
yeah, let's
LaVine.
Let's break it down.
You're going Schroeder, LaVine, DeRozan, Keegan, and Sabonis.
Mm-hmm.
How does Keegan fit into that? DeMar DeRozan's a ball dominant guy. LaVine's going to be taking shots. Malik Monk takes shots. So it's you look at this team and like there's some young talent on here that you'd like to get ample opportunity, but where do they fit in? So I feel like the Kings are going to be stuck at kind of in this weird land up until the deadline to see if they could move some of these pieces. Is it someone like DeMar DeRozan? His name's been brought up. Is it someone like Malik Monk down the stretch? I like Malik. I want him here. But you start thinking long terms, like, all right, how do you fit in and pick a direction for this group?
We've been super realistic this entire offseason of when we try and focus in on even your question of like, okay, well, who needs to take the biggest step? We go, well, we want this person, but this person will have the ball and this person will have the ball and this person will have minutes. And then, you think about NBA culture and we always talk about the resume of guys, what they get paid. And that's why they're getting these minutes. And it's, you're trying to keep those relationships and keep agents happy and keep players happy. So then nobody's like, just talking crap about your organization 24/7. So there's so many different things you have to juggle. And with a new, head coach in Doug Christie, obviously, he had a little bit of time last year, but like his year, his team, his system, all the different things from the start. It's just a lot to actually answer like, okay, who needs to take the jump? Because right now I don't even know what the roster is necessarily going to look like. But if it looks like this, Zena, it just seems like a lot of veteran players will be the ones with the ball in their hands doing what they do.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of ball dominant guards being involved in the situation. And let's just be real. I mean, everyone's been talking about this team since last year as the Chicago Kings, thinking about DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. These two, in my opinion, are players with something to prove. Chips on their shoulder. People have questioned their capability of being championship caliber leaders. And in my opinion, that's who I look to say, you've got to take a step forward, but we have to consider the fact they will be a step forward in terms of their age, in terms of their experience on the floor. But that doesn't necessarily mean that age will translate into being slower. We saw Zach LaVine look explosive last year. DeMar DeRozan still putting up those numbers that he's had. So what are the expectations, in my opinion, for those two specifically who came to this program looking to change something and elevate the Kings? What are your thoughts on what they should provide?
When you just talked about taking a step forward, sometimes for some of these veteran players in this league, not necessarily even those two guys, but I just think in this league, taking a step forward is sometimes taking a step back, right?
Ooh, that's a word. That's a word. Yes.
That's deep.
I know.
That's deep. That's real.
But yeah, and you hear it and you understand it because that would mean like, especially for this team specifically, it's like, okay, so this guy can get better. And so this team, this organization, this culture can grow with these younger guys. But you just mentioned it with Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. They're still trying to be in this league, get paid, put up their numbers and do what they love the most. And that's playing basketball. So it's really hard to tell people that love the game to like, hey, take a step back. This is what you need to do next, because they're going to keep doing what they do. But what I hope that does include, I guess, for those two, someone like DeMar, for example, when they wanted to play with that fast-paced basketball, when they still had De'Aaron Fox on the team, it felt like at times it would be slowed down. And then I think the Kings started doing a better job of implementing, in half-court offense and slowing down and going iso ball with DeMar, like trying to find that balance. So where can they just find that balance of what works with these guys in their games and not just try and create this identity of whatever Doug Christie might want for his offense? You got to work with what you have.
Yeah, I look at LaVine and his shooting ability is near the top of the league. I mean, the guy can get hot and get going. I think last year, you get traded in the middle of the year. His wife just gave birth to another kid, right? And like, so you're getting used to a new place. Your family's living somewhere else. You're in Sacramento. There's like expectations. Oh, they've got this interim coach in Doug Christie. Oh, and by the way, there's no point guard. Like, so there's like the off-court stuff. There's like the on-court fit. And my hope is like, all right, he can settle in here now. Has a relationship with Doug Christie. Everybody's on the same page. And now you have a point guard that can play with pace and get you into stuff faster. LaVine likes playing fast. He wants to get up and down the floor and get him shots that could help him play to the best of his ability. And like DeMar DeRozan, he won the Kings many games last year. The guy's a bucket. He's one of the best scorers we have seen, in the last, 15 years. He can do that. I think the biggest question when people look at Sacramento is not necessarily like the individual talent. You see the names, you're like, oh, that's a good player. That's a good player. It's like, oh, yeah, but what's their style? What are they going to be doing defensively?
Right.
They don't have defensive pieces. You mentioned DeRozan. Sabonis has his limitations defensively just from like a length perspective. LaVine has never been a good defensive player. So you're looking around, and it seems like some of their best defenders are their young players.
Yeah.
It's Keegan. It's Keon. Nick has shown some potential too. It's just a weird group that's put together right now. And I think that the Kings team that we're going to be looking at opening night when they open the season against the Phoenix Suns will not be the team that we see come February after the trade deadline.
Yeah, I was looking at, just the stats of this team in terms of the shot output, and there are about 20 attempts that opened up when De'Aaron Fox left this team. And you're looking, Keegan Murray's at the very bottom of that list in terms of only about 11 attempts per game. You talk about Zach LaVine being one of the best shooters in the league, 51% from the floor, 45% from the field. And I'm like, great. Offense is great. We know that these are scores. We know that they can provide that. And I really do think that, Mo, you're making a great point in the Keegan Murray aspect of where do they fit. And then on your last point about the defense, when I was thinking about the end of season Kings, and I'm looking at Keon Ellis, I'm looking at Devin Carter, I'm looking at Keegan Murray, working out there, trying to get some energy, some life. And there were moments where you're like getting really excited about what's going to happen next. But in terms of growth and development for this league, my problem is where's the fit to be like, what are the roles in which they can grow? And so I just asked you about DeMar and Zach, the older players on this league, thinking about the younger players. And we've talked a little bit about Keegan already, but thinking about the younger players on this team, who's ready for their opportunity? Who is someone that you're like, they could have a breakout season this year?
Well, I guess it would, if we are going to pick one person right now, I'd be like, oh, well, it's got to be Keegan, right? With the amount of years that he's in this league now and what we've seen on both sides of the ball, from his offense, even his rookie season, his, 3-point shooting ability to how his defense has grown over the years. Now, how can he find the balance of defending the best person on the floor to also being a scorer on the other end, and maybe even just adjusting his game too, and just not being in the catch and shoot situations, but demanding the basketball so he can go to work.
Yeah.
Or other actions are being, called out for him, where it's like you're seeing someone screen his player or whatever it is, and he's cutting through the paint, or he's posting up and getting big on the other block. Like, I just think he's able to do so much more, but everyone still has to buy in and still move around without the basketball. It's not about like going ISO for Keegan. It's making sure that actions and movements are happening and the offense is flowing. And that just takes a buy-in from everyone if anyone wants to see Keegan take another step, but he has to demand it.
I'm with you. And that's the biggest thing. Like, he's got to take it upon himself a little bit more too. And the team has to look for ways to get him involved. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's 6'8", who could play defense and has the ability to stretch the floor. He showed last year getting the downhill in transition. I mean, he's like playing bully ball in transition and shedding defenders and scoring at the rim. And you saw the glimpses, but it doesn't happen all the time. His rebounding went up last year. There are things you love. I mean, look, in today's game, I want a guy who's 6'8" that will defend like 4 positions. Hit three. Like, this is the type of player I want on my team.
You're acting like, well, duh. Don't we all want that?
No, exactly. So I'm like, you have to find a way to make this work with Keegan Murray. Like, he needs to be part of like what you're doing going forward. So, I think he's got the ability to do it. And now can Doug Christie, which something that doesn't get talked enough about is last year when he took over, it was all Mike Brown's assistants. It was kind of an interesting dynamic because, Doug Christie wasn't necessarily like a Mike Brown guy per se, right? Like he was on the previous coaching staff, then he was with Mike Brown. And then once Brown got let go, he was elevated to the interim, tag. Well, all the guys working under him for the most part were hired by Mike Brown. It's an interesting dynamic. And that is so important. Just having your staff that you can trust. We were listening to Valkyrie's head coach Natalie Nakaste talk about this the other day, how she visited Joe Mazzulla in Boston. And she said, I could not tell the hierarchy of the coaching staff. They were so together. Everybody was doing everything. And the Kings did not have that last year after Mike Brown got let go. So now Doug has a staff, a coaching staff that he vibes with. They're connected. And I think that goes a long way in making sure the things that we talk about are more achievable, playing the right way, making sure Keegan's involved, sharing the ball, moving without the ball, playing defense. It's all the things that they want to do. The challenge is, how do you establish this with kind of a hodgepodge group of vets and young players?
Well, the contracts are what they are. Of course, there's conversations about potentially adding a Jonathan Kuminga from the team a little bit down south. And thinking about potentially adding a Russell Westbrook into the mix. What would these additions look like for the Kings? How could they change making this hodgepodge group a little bit more melded together?
The Kuminga one, I'm all about. Mm-hmm. If you can execute that sign and trade, and it's not going to cost you a ton to do it in a trade with Golden State, you do it because Kuminga's got upside. I'm more than aware of his warts, but what I do know is he's a 6'8" athletic freak, something they absolutely lack. And you see the flashes from him. You saw the flashes offensively last year, defensively. There's inconsistencies too, but he's a young player. And I think about him with Keegan Murray, and I'm like, oh,
low risk, young. And yes.
Yeah, the versatility there a little bit defensively. Does that take some pressure off Keegan defensively? You know what I mean? You would have the ability to have some more intriguing lineups. It doesn't solve everything, but that's the type of move a small market like Sacramento can take. It's like, let's take a swing at this. If it doesn't work out, it's not going to kill our cap, all that stuff. Yes. As far as Westbrook, look, I respect Russell Westbrook and what he's achieved in this league. Players love him. He plays with an edge and he approaches practice like it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. I love that about him. I love that edge. But I'm just looking at this group and I'm like, all right, you're trying to establish a culture, but by bringing Westbrook in, does that mean Keon Ellis isn't playing? Does that mean Nate Clifford's not playing? You got Schroeder. Again, we went over all these names. How do you find minutes for all these players?
Yeah. So that's why I guess ultimately when you look at some of these names, does it make it less of a hodgepodge? Well, it also depends on what tweaks are being made for these players, right? Because even I guess for Jonathan Kuminga, obviously there would be other pieces involved. And then that's maybe where it creates a little bit more space on the roster and, with minutes and everything. But at the same time, I think it's going to be a hodgepodge kind of year. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. I think sometimes you can have fun with it because then the expectations are so low. So then if things do go better than your low expectations. Hi, we're in Sacramento. I mean, that's just what it's been like. Yeah, it's like you get excited for certain wins. I mean, I remember Warriors fans when Kings fans were excited about like a good game beating the Warriors
in the play-in.
Oh, especially in the play-in. They're like, well, look at the rings, look at the championships. I'm like, haven't been there, so I'm not going to act like I've been there before. And I'm going to get excited and act like we just won championships over here, okay? Like
that's popping bottles.
Yeah. And so I think with this hodgepodge year, low expectations, and if they can somehow work it out with the pieces that they have from here, great, then we'll get excited.
So the thing about the Kings, though, is that it feels like it's been consistently, and I'm not saying this as any shade, but it really feels like it's been consistently hodgepodge years. And I guess my question to you is, what's the difference this year? Like, what do you think is the biggest swing factor for the team? Because we've laid out a few. Yeah. One, Scott Perry being the GM, being able to add the pieces that he's been able to add. That's great. Two, Deuce, you just beautifully laid out the fact that Mike Christie finally has his squad under his helm, able to, corral this team together and be in the same direction in terms of how they want the vision for this team to work. And then Mo, you've reached out of like the young players and how they've got to figure out, one, Keegan's got to demand the ball and people've got to buy in and they've got to figure out a way to get this team to the next level. What's the biggest change you would say from last year's hodgepodge year to potentially this year?
Biggest change?
I mean,
I hate that you guys are lost for words, but like, what's the swing factor?
I mean, we could talk about like if somehow, here's a swing.
Okay.
If somehow Neat Clifford is able to carve out a role, and I think I'm intrigued by him, and I'm not trying to get too caught up in summer league, but even after they drafted him, watching what he was able to do and how his game's evolved, he's got good size. I think his passing ability is really underrated. He's got a good shot, and you're looking at him going, okay, like if he's able to carve out a role on this team and be like a playmaker at his size, that could be extremely valuable for this team.
Yeah.
But the main core is still the same core as of last year. You know what I mean? Like, the Fox trade is going to go down as one of those trades. That's a mistake, not necessarily because they traded De'Aaron Fox, but because in return you get LaVine and you're kind of just stuck with that deal. Like, and Scott Perry, I don't think he would have made that trade. And so Scott takes over this situation. And he's got a lot of work to do coming up here, right? And you're kind of like, hey, Zach LaVine makes $50 million. So how do you maximize him and get him playing to the best of his ability and also establish a culture of everything they want to be defensively? It's tough.
Being in a small market and covering a team in the small market and living here, born and raised, all the things, like you get to see it all. And so over so many of the earlier years of my days covering this team, you saw how, and it still is this way with getting free agents in here. It's difficult, right? But when you have an established culture and you start to see winning, like even the Beam team playoff year, like after that, it was like, ooh, is there a little bit of promise there? Is there something else there with this organization that could be appealing to people? But if you don't have that consistently, how is that going to be appealing? So then when you do have an asset and you develop it here, you have to do the right thing. And with De'Aaron Fox, that was not the right thing to do, whether they felt, not threatened with Rich Paul, but like scared of what he could do and where he would want De'Aaron to go and all these different things. They should have just stayed strong and been like, no, we're going to keep him till the end of the year. And then we're going to deal with this. And then maybe they could have gotten the most out of him, but they got what they got and they're in the situation that they're in, but this GM didn't do that. And so now we're just letting this GM deal with the hodgepodge and kind of like make the tweaks as he can.
Yeah, and you know why it's so hard? Because they had a 16-year playoff drought and they snapped it, won 48 games. It was so magical. The Beam team year went 7 games with the Warriors, and you're thinking, okay, they're building something here. They have a coach who wins Coach of the Year, an executive who wins Executive of the Year. Vibes are high. The city is abuzz. Like, it felt magical, and it ended up being a Costco sample size. We got a little taste of it. And I was like, that's it. And now it seems like it's reverting back to some tough times. And so now it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate from here. And like Morgan said, maybe, our expectations are, lower this year. And maybe that's a good thing. Last year I'm going, DeMar DeRozan could score better than Harrison Barnes. It's not a perfect fit, but it's going to be an upgrade. I think they win 50 games if healthy. Well, what do you know? Their coach gets fired in December. Fox gets traded in February, and they lose in the play in the Dallas in the game I never want to think about again.
Yeah. It was abrupt. It was a little whiplash for the Kings, especially going from 48 wins, and it's still 46 wins the year after that in 2023, wasn't bad. And then, last year ending up 40-42, still in that 9th place spot. It feels like they're just right on the cusp of being able to make it in. And so with that, going into this season, everything we've just laid out, it's a bit of a hodgepodge here. You still have some of the best scorers in the NBA on this roster. You've added a Swiss Army knife and a rookie of Nate Clifford. You still have a developing talent in Keegan Murray and a defensive stalwart in Keon Ellis. I love him on the perimeter. There's so many still pieces in this hodgepodge of a puzzle that are the Kings. So what is a realistic outcome for this team this year?
There's good people there. And if there was a buy-in to whatever Doug Christie's system was, because that is exactly what you saw in the first fun year of Mike Brown, just a buy-in. You know, it's kind of the honeymoon year. And sometimes that can go in a really good direction. But I think when you talk about where that could land for the Kings this year, what is it that you've been saying all off season long?
I was saying best case, everything goes right. Like, hey, coaching staff vibes are good. You know, Schroeder is a good lift. Nate Clifford helps. Hey, can you win 41 games? Can you be in that right around the same as last year?
Yeah, same as last year. Okay.
But the reality is, look at the West. Who is bad in the West? There is one team that you go, oh, I don't know about them, and that's Utah. After that, you can make a case for a lot of teams. People are higher on Portland, San Antonio. What's it going to look like with Fox and Wemby for a full season? They add Dylan Harper to the fold. Who's bad? Like it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. So for me, it's like, I mean, I think if I'm being honest about it, I'm like that they look like a mid-30s team. This is a team that's got enough talent not to be awful, but they're not good enough. I think defensively with their star guys, the guys that they will be playing, to be a consistent winning team. They will have games where they look great. I think offensively, even last year, they were 7th in offensive rating. They can be very explosive offensively at times, but I have my doubts about the consistency. And I just think they've got a lot of work to do long-term to build this one out. And I think Scott Perry looks at it like this. Look at some of the best teams in the league right now. And I know it's a prisoner at the moment, but you know, the finals, OKC and Indiana. This wasn't like a whole bunch of big threes playing, right? This was a team. Both teams just bought into a system. They sacrificed. They played defense. I think where we're headed in this league is who has depth at like every position, who has buy-in, who's willing to do everything. Players with weaknesses end up getting played off the floor come playoff time. And so you have to have versatility, be able to defend and shoot and have buy-in, sacrifice, run, play with pace. And I think that's the goal. I don't know that they have that at the moment.
Guys, you can't see Morgan, but she is just amening. I mean, as Deuce is going, she's like, yes, that's right. The buy-in. She's literally creating the connectivity through her fingertips. It seems like you guys are on the same page on that one. It definitely seems like they got to get on the same page as well as a Kings organization. And, you know, I'm always rooting for the Kings. I just always want them to do well.
Thank you. You know, actually, it makes it fun. Good that you say that, because I think everybody who watches the league just wants the Kings to be respectable just for Kings fans. They know what Kings fans have been through. They know what they go through.
It's very kind.
It's a great fan base.
Yeah.
So loyal. It's our team. And even when they're bad, they're going to support. And guess what? Next year, even if they're winning 35 games, if DeMar DeRozan hits a game winner in a meaningless game in December, we're going to be like, let's go. And we're going to have moments of belief. And that's what makes sports fun. It's just sometimes believing and having hope is all you can. It's
do. What it could carry you through an entire NBA season.
Yeah, I'm still excited for the season. Don't get me wrong. Bring it on. Let's go.
Okay. All right. This is exactly what we needed. We need that little boost of energy. That's why we're doing these season previews. Get folks excited. Get the people going. And that's exactly what you guys bring. Deuce and Mo, go check them out on YouTube. Where else can we find you guys?
Yeah. Deuce and Mo podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. We go live after Kings games. We do NBA, WNBA coverage too. And then, NBC Sports California pre and post game following Sacramento Kings games.
There you go. Well, Deuce and Mo, thanks for coming on to the NBA Daily. Guys, keep it locked for all the season previews. We gonna make sure you guys are ready for this NBA season.
Welcome back to the NBA Daily. I'm Dave DuFour here with Jay King for another team preview. This time it's the Boston Celtics turn. And Jay, last season was probably a little bit boring for you. They won the title the year before. They didn't really have to change anything. And needless to say, I think this season is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it's not going to be boring this time. There's a lot to figure out. They have a front court of totally unproven guys. Joe Mazzulla has always coached a title contender. Now he's going to be coaching something different. Jaylen Brown is going to get elevated into the top role. There's a lot going on. Here.
What do you think is the biggest change? I mean, I think the Tatum injury, the Jason Tatum Achilles tear, is obviously the biggest negative for this team. But let's just throw that aside. What's going to be the biggest change for this team?
I just think the amount of front court talent they lost is going to be like the number one storyline in whether they're able to exceed their lower expectations. Because it's not just centers. Like, you look at the centers, and they added Chris Boucher, who has started, I believe it's 23 games in his career. They added Luka Garza, who hardly ever played in Minnesota. They kept Nemi, who was their fourth string center, now might be their starter. And I'm not sure that center is their worst front court position because who do they have at power forward? Chris Boucher, Xavier Tillman. Can they play Sam Hauser there? Can they play Jaylen Brown there? They've never really done that in the past because Jason Tatum was their starting power forward. And when they didn't have him, a lot of the time they played bigger lineups with Al Horford at 4 or, and now it's just going to be totally different. So the 4, the 5, what do they do there? Who plays? Do they just go small and launch threes? Because I think that could be the way to go. Throw Sam Hauser out there into the starting lineup at power forward next to Jaylen Brown and have Peyton Pritchard start next to Derrick White. And all of a sudden your offense is probably great. Your defense might be awful, but they lost a whole lot of defense. And it's going to be interesting to see how Joe sort of covers up because he's got a lot more weak links than he's ever had in his 3 years as Celtics head coach.
Of the new guys added to the team or the guys that are already there that are going to be just getting bigger roles, who do you feel like is going to make the most impact?
So Anfernee Simons is probably the best player of the guys they've added. I'm very curious to see how it works out. They the Celtics, they've looked into ways to shed more salary, and Anfernee Simons, trading him would be one of the most obvious ways to do that. He has a $27 million expiring contract. If you bring back less than that, you shed your tax bill. You maybe have a chance to get out of the luxury tax. So at this point of the offseason, they would have to shed a lot of money still to do that. But so they looked into the market for trading him and flipping him for less money. And I don't know that there were a lot of suitors out there. I certainly don't know that there was a lot of interest out there. So Anfernee Simons, for now at least, is on the roster. It's the biggest weak link defensively the Celtics have had since Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
And Isaiah Thomas was one of the 5 best offensive players in the league that year. He was second team All NBA. And so what do they do with Anfernee Simons? It's not really Brad Stevens is in his DNA to add a guy who has always graded out near the bottom of the league in defense. Is he part of the long-term future? I don't know. But I do know that he's a great volume shooter, one of the better volume shooters in the league the last few years, probably one of the most overlooked offensive talents that has produced year after year in Portland where it's kind of been overlooked. And so how does he fit next to Derrick White? How does he fit next to Peyton Pritchard? How does Joe Mazzulla make sense of a roster that is skewed so heavily toward the perimeter guys when you add Jaylen Brown and Sam Hauser into that? And is so inexperienced at the power forward and center positions. It's just going to be fascinating to watch it. I think this Celtics team has a chance to be much worse defensively than they've been in a long time, depending on what lineup choices Joe Mazzulla makes. And I just think they're probably going to play a lot faster and shoot maybe just as many threes as they did last season when they set a league record. I think it's going to be, they're going to play some high scoring games this year.
I think it's going to be tough to get that kind of 3-point volume when you don't have the defense that they had. I mean, it just feels like you get a bad shooting night and you have no chance, which Boston, listen, when they lose, it's typically that the other team hits their shots and they missed it. It got to be kind of boring sometimes, when you were watching the Celtics. This year is not going to be that. You already mentioned Jaylen Brown has to slide up into that number one role. I mean, what are the expectations for Jaylen Brown? I mean, we've long wondered, could he be the lead dog on his own team? And now he's going to get a chance.
One of the stats that I keep harping on my own podcast, Celtics podcast, is that when he played without Jason Tatum next to him, his assists per 100 possessions last year were close to 10. And obviously Jaylen Brown, you don't think of him as, a legit playmaker, but for his size to spread the ball around the way that he did when Tatum was out last season, I think that showed the growth in his game over the past few years. It showed that, he's not just playing for his own buckets anymore. He's seeing the game a lot differently. And to me, that's going to be the deciding factor for him this year. It's not, can he score more? Of course he could score more. Sure. Of course, with Kristaps Porzingis gone and Tatum injured and Drew Holiday gone and Al Horford gone, though we haven't seen the resolution there yet, that, he's going to be able to shoulder a bigger scoring load. But can you make the game easier for the big men? Can you make them easier for Neemias Queta? Can you make it easier for Luka Garza? Can you alleviate the pressure that's going to be on Derrick White and Peyton Pritchard as they get adjusted to probably bigger roles? And I think Jaylen's strides he's made as a playmaker, and you can throw in the 3 games they played in the playoffs without Jason Tatum last year. He had a dud in the game 6. They lost to New York. That was when they got eliminated. But his 2 other games, one of them was a 35-point, 12 assist, 8 rebound gem. And I just think he's a lot more ready for this than he has been in the past. And I think it's going to come down to, though, are you willing to make the right play, the smart play every time, even when the guys around you aren't as talented as they have been the last few years?
Yeah, his driving kick game is kind of perfect for what they do offensively, right? They've got shooters all the way around. He can get to the basket, and he's been a willing passer, right? He's not forcing a lot of stuff inside and has improved his efficiency. But what about his shooting? It's going to be more off the dribble for him. I mean, he's improved there. I think at least he's been more willing to take those off the dribble, but he's going to need to take a lot more. I mean, do you feel like he can withstand that sort of off the dribble shooting volume that he's going to have to as the number one guy?
Yeah. So he's his shooting dipped last year. He had a down shooting year. He and Tatum both have had, pretty big. I feel like his role and their role really is more so to get everybody else easier threes.
Right.
And if you take them, fine, you got to take them to keep the defense honest. But to me, it's, can he get good looks? Can he force the defense to collapse? Can he draw double teams in a way that opens up Anfernee Simons and opens up Peyton Pritchard and Derrick White? Because I think the lineups that they can play, and I mean, I would even include Keita, who is a great offensive rebounder, and Luka Garza, who's per 36 minutes stats during his very limited minutes in Minnesota, sparkle. That dude is going to come in and I think be a productive offensive player from day one. He's shot a ton of threes, though he hasn't really made threes yet. There's hope in Boston, at least, that he'll start to knock those down. But I think there's a lot of talent, and Keita will be a lob catcher. I just think there's a lot of shooting talent, a lot of scoring talent, as long as the Celtics are healthy. Yeah. And they don't have the depth. They certainly, unless young guys emerge, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman, unless those guys step up and are more prepared for their opportunities than they have been in the past, then this is going to be a very thin team, a team that cannot probably sustain a lot of injuries. But for Jaylen, I think it's going to be, there should be easy passes around him. There should be a lot of shooting around him. There should be big guys who can offensive rebound. I really think this offense has a chance to be pretty good as long as everybody stays on the court.
Yeah.
And if they don't, it could get really ugly.
And they've got Derrick White. Derrick White's now like the second best player on the roster. What sort of season does he need to have for the Celtics to be good?
Yeah. So he's always been a guy that, like, he's willing to take a backseat, probably more willing to take a backseat than he should be, given his talent and production and efficiency and all that. They've kind of been convincing him since he got to Boston to do more, to try more, to be more a part of the offense, to be more aggressive. And there won't be any room for him to be anything else this year. In the past, when they've been down Tatum, when they've been down Brown, he's typically scaled up. And as I look at the season, his ability to remain efficient with more opportunities and Pritchard's ability to remain efficient with more opportunities is going to be so crucial, because, you know, it's one thing when you're Derrick White, role player extraordinaire, and doing everything right, making the right play night after night. Like, he's fantastic at basketball. But when you're doing more, when you're tasked with doing more, when Jason Tatum isn't there to draw double teams and create advantages and make the game easier for you, are you able to have more touches, take more shots, and still be as efficient? That was one of the brilliant things about Pritchard's Sixth Man of the Year award, was like, he was asked to do a lot more than he ever had in the past. He took way more threes than he ever had in the past, and he still had the most efficient season of his career, one of the most efficient seasons any player had last season. So I just think, can he do it again with even more touches? And that backcourt with Pritchard and White, and then Simons has kind of done it in a bigger role before, but how can he do it in a way that helps a team win? And can he defend? Can he learn how to play that side of the ball? Maybe a new culture with, you know, guys who have won championship. Maybe he needs that. Maybe he needs to be in Boston and learn how to defend. If I were him, given the way, you know, Portland, they kind of gave up on him. They said, we want to go with Scoot Henderson. They traded him for Drew Holiday, who's a much older guy who doesn't really match their timeline. And so if I were him, I'd be thinking, man, as much as I've produced offensively, there are real questions about my value around the league, and I have to prove that I can defend. I have to prove that I can fit in. I have to prove that I can do all those things better. And I think this is a real prove it or don't year for him. And if I were him, I'd be as bought in as possible to not just to help the team, but also because he's going to be in a contract year, and the rest of the league clearly has questions and concerns over how much he actually helps a basketball team.
It's not even him. It's the archetype. You know, Colin Sexton was given away, essentially. You know, Jordan Poole, obviously, like kind of a similar situation where you have these smaller guards who can score but can't play any defense whatsoever. And it just seems like the
Cam
league
Thomas.
Yeah, Cam Thomas. I mean, he bet on himself, but, you know, Anfernee Simons already got this big contract. And as soon as he gets traded there, you know, the buzz is, okay, well, they want to dump the salary for the tax savings. So, you know, you expect, is Peyton Pritchard the starter? No chance Anfernee Simons can slot in there?
I would guess so. Pritchard, obviously coming off Sixth Man of the Year award winning season, but it's an easy sell to a guy like that. Like, look, you're behind Drew Holiday and Derrick White.
Right.
We're going to bring you off the bench every night. But now, you know, as a championship winning point guard, as someone who's sacrificed in the past, I think it's a different ask to say, you know what, we're going to bring you off the bench so that Anfernee Simons can start.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah. and so I would guess that he starts. I would guess that he starts, but I'm not positive on that. That's definitely one of the questions that they'll have to answer going into this season. I just think Pritchard, it's, you don't talk about his defense a lot, and obviously with his size, he'll never be a premier defender. But I just think there's a big gap between the defense that he's played in the past and the defense that Anfernee Simons has played in the past.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Who's the guy most likely to take a leap on the roster? I mean, not counting Jaylen Brown, he's already a star, but is there anybody that could pop for them this year? Maybe it's Luka Garza playing the 4 or something.
Yeah, I think I would put Garza on the short list. If you look, honestly, I brought up his per 36 minute numbers before. If you look at what he's done in a very limited minutes in the past, that guy fills up a stat sheet. He's been one of the best offensive rebounders per minute in the league since he got there. Obviously, he was behind a bunch of great players in the Minnesota front court. And he's very excited for an opportunity where he's not behind those type of guys. I think as long as you can figure out something defensively so that you don't get absolutely shredded every time he's on the court, I think he'll be a helpful player. And then Peyton Pritchard, I just think there's more there. Every time they've had a guy out in the past, his numbers have just shot up. And in a way that they don't lose a lot as far as how they play, the brand of basketball that they play. They have still kicked everyone's behind when they've been down guys, and Peyton Pritchard has needed to play up a role, basically. So I think there's just more to his game that hasn't even been shown yet. I'm a big believer in his offensive talent, his ability to create space, his high level shooting. And I just think with more responsibilities, I think, there's a chance that you look up and his stat line this year is like pretty eye opening.
If they make a move this year, do you feel like it's going to be to improve the team, to get a future or player that they see being in their plans for the future? Kind of like when they got Derrick White, or do you just see it tax move? It's Anfernee Simons, get him off the books, save that money. What sort of moves do you expect from the Celtics this year?
Tax moves wouldn't be surprising at all. The other glaring, obvious hole that they have right now is in the front court. And if you can find a way to solidify your front court, not necessarily for this year, because, even if Tatum comes back this year, he's not going to be the Jason Tatum people remember. Yeah. He's not going to come back from a torn Achilles and just be ready to play championship caliber basketball this year. Like, that's just not going to happen. So realistically, you're trying to compete, not this year, but next season and beyond. But that said, you're going to need to find maybe not just one big guy, but maybe two big guys for when you are ready to compete, for when Tatum is back and healthy. And so if I were them, I'd be on the lookout for that move, whether it costs a little money now, like whatever. You need to bring in somebody who can be a high level front court guy to bring you back, because it wasn't just Kristaps Porzingis and soon to be Al Horford that they've lost. Luke Cornett was one of the better backup big men in the league last year, signed a pretty big contract with San Antonio. So you've lost some serious talent and really replaced them only with Luka Garza and Chris Boucher, guys who have not really done much in their careers. And Chris Boucher is almost 33 years old. Garza is much younger. I think there's upside potentially there that could never be mined in Minnesota, just because they did have, Rudy Gobert, Karl Towns, Julius Randle, like Naz Reid. They just had a long list of guys in front of him that he was never going to crack that rotation. But if Garza and Keita aren't your guys, then they've got to be on the lookout to find that championship level big man at some point soon.
Anybody come to mind?
I mean, I look at the Mavericks roster, and they just have so many big men. So that's what are you going to do with Lively, with PJ
Gafford,
Washington, with Gafford, with Cooper Flagg, with Anthony Davis? Obviously, Cooper Flagg's not going to become available unless Nico goes crazy again. Obviously, Anthony Davis isn't going to become available, but those lopsided rosters where you have so much at one position, I think the Celtics will be in contact with the front offices of those teams.
What's the most realistic outcome? Obviously, this is not a championship team. They have torn it down, right? Quite a bit. We just laid it out there. What do you think is going to happen for the Celtics this year?
I think as long as they're fully healthy, they'll be pretty good. Like, if you could guarantee me that they would all their best players, and I'll throw Jaylen Brown, Derrick White, Peyton Pritchard. But you even need like you need Sam Hauser to stay healthy. Like you need everybody to stay healthy because the depth really dries up. If you could guarantee everyone would be moderately healthy, I'd say they probably win 45 to 48 games. But I just think like Jaylen Brown has played 70 games once in the last 5 seasons, I believe. What happens for the 15 games that he misses? And what happens if he has an extended absence where you're forced to play Baylor Shireman and Jordan Walsh legitimate minutes? That's when I think, and then you're already playing a front court of guys that have never really played big roles elsewhere and are getting featured for the first time. And you have Anfernee Simons, your worst weak link on defense in years. I just think that there's disaster potential if they lose just 1 or 2 guys to injury, and that at the end of the day, you could look up and it could be like the Sixers last year. Things go wrong early and you just call it. And it's like, all right, let's just punt on the rest of this season, get a better draft pick and move on to when Jason Tatum is back and healthy and try to run it back again with these guys. And we've seen that before, like the Warriors year when Clay was hurt and then Steph got hurt. What was it, like 4 games into the season?
Yeah.
And they just basically were like, it's over. It's over, guys. No need. Let's just try again next year. And I don't think it'll be that bad, that drastic. But I do think that injuries could convince the organization to kind of take a step back from this year and start planning toward the future.
I mean, it's been an amazing run. You don't really think about it because the Celtics are always just there. But during this Tatum and Brown run, you could just pencil them into top 3 in the East. And you just knew, hey, this is a 50-55 win team every single year. They're going to get into at least the second round. But really, they're going to push to the conference finals more times than not. It's a different world in the East. We've been talking a lot about parity last season or the last few seasons even. And, with the Celtics being knocked down a few pegs, East feels completely wide open. Like Cleveland has a lot to prove right now. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but, you do cover the Celtics and have for a long time. Who needs to come out of the East? Because it's not going to be the Celtics.
I think Cleveland needs to, right? Like they have been a great regular season team. They were a great regular season team last year. To lose to Indiana the way that they did brought up just questions about them. And obviously Indiana was better than anybody realized during the regular season, I think. And that was a real team. They obviously pushed the Thunder to the very end of the NBA Finals. There's no shame in losing to the Pacers, but just it brought up questions like, do Mitchell and Garland as a backcourt, is that a good enough fit? Can Evan Mobley, is he good enough as your second best player right now at this stage of his career? I just think there's a lot of pressure on them because the East is so open right now. Indiana, they're without Tyrese Halliburton. Boston is without Jason Tatum. So Cleveland, I think New York has a ton of pressure right now. I have more questions about them than I do about Cleveland because I think Cleveland is a well-built team that's going to win a ton of games. They just need to be better once the playoffs arrive. I think Orlando has a chance to be fantastic. I mean, it's open now. And Desmond Bane should be a great fit to help juice their offense. If either one of Banchero or Wagner takes a shooting leap and becomes a guy where you have to guard him at the arc, that changes everything for that entire team. Yeah. And all of a sudden they're not just, the big, physical, rugged, badass defense. They're also, oh wow, like Banchero's hell. Yeah. and so I think Orlando has a chance. I think Atlanta is a real threat in the East too. What they've done to surround Trae Young with guys who fit really, really well next to him. Obviously you need defense and length everywhere around him. Well, they've got Dyson Daniels. They've got Jalen Johnson. They've got Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They added Kristaps Porzingis, who's not just going to protect the rim at an extremely high level, but also give Trae Young a pick and pop option, the likes of which he's never had, and a post up threat that he's never had next to him. And so obviously Kristaps is, a health risk, but I just think that Hawks team is really well put together, and I expect them to win a lot of games. I expect Trae Young to be one of the, it's hard to say breakout because he's been, posting insane stats from the time he was walked into the NBA. But I think because the team is right around him, that his flaws will matter less and his strengths will be accentuated, and he's due for a great, great season.
Yeah, winning opens a lot of eyes. Jay King covers the Boston Celtics for us. I'm assuming is going to be doing a bunch of other stuff around the Eastern Conference this year, with Boston being a little bit down. Jay, thanks for hanging out. Guys, go and check out his podcast. It's not anything is potable.
Still potable. Still
That's
potable,
right.
baby.
Still potable. Him and Jam Packer cover the Celtics. Guys, we'll have more previews after this.